Welcome to The Explainer. Let's start with the question. What if love wasn't some finite resource? Today, we're diving into the world of polyamory, a relationship style that's really challenging our traditional ideas and honestly seeing a huge surge in acceptance.
And hey, that surge isn't just a vibe. We've got the numbers to prove it. A 2020 Gallup poll found that a full 20%, that's 1 in 5 Americans, now considers polyamory to be morally acceptable.
But here's the part that'll really make you pause. That number, it's a four-fold increase from 2006. Think about that. In just over a decade, we've witnessed a massive cultural shift in how we think and talk about relationships.
So, to really get a handle on this, we're going to break it all down. We'll start with what polyamory actually is, get the key terms right, explore all the different ways it can look, and dig into why it's so deeply connected to the queer community.
All right, let's kick things off with the big question in our first section. What does polyamory actually mean?
So at its absolute core, polyamory is about having multiple romantic relationships, with the key ingredients being honesty and consent from everyone involved. It's all built on this central idea that love isn't like a pie with only so many slices. It's abundant.
And if that still feels a little abstract, here's a really brilliant way to think about it. Just think about your friends, right? We have these incredibly deep, loving, committed relationships with lots of different friends, and we don't expect them to be our only friend. Polyamory just applies that very same logic to romantic love.
Okay, so that's the basic idea. But to really get into the nitty-gritty, we need to get the language right, because the vocabulary here is super important for understanding all the nuances.
First thing you need to know, polyamory sits under this big, broad umbrella called non-monogamy. That's basically just any relationship style that isn't sexually and romantically exclusive between two people. And trust me, that umbrella covers a lot of ground. Now, this brings us to one of the biggest points of confusion. What's the difference between polyamory and an open relationship? Well, while an open relationship can be polyamorous, the key distinction is that polyamory specifically focuses on having multiple, loving, romantic connections. It's about building relationships, not just having sexual encounters.
Now that we've got the terms down, let's explore what these relationships can actually look like in the real world.
But before we dive into diagrams and labels, it's so important to hear this from expert Rachel Wright. These aren't rigid rules you have to follow. They're just terms people use to describe different dynamics. The main point is always about flexibility and figuring out what truly works for you.
Okay, so one of the most common structures you'll hear about is a triad. Sometimes people call it a throuple. It's pretty much what it sounds like. 3 people, and they're all in a relationship with each other.
Then there's the V, and for this one, just picture the letter V. You've got one person at the bottom point, and they act as the hinge, connecting 2 different partners who are not in a direct relationship with each other.
And from there, things can expand into a quad or a polycule, which is just a whole network of interconnected partners. People often visualize it like a constellation of stars, with lines drawn between people to show all the different connections.
Now, you can lay another idea on top of any of these structures, hierarchy. Some people have a hierarchical setup with primary and secondary partners, but others prefer a non-hierarchical approach where every relationship is on equal footing and no single partnership gets automatic priority over another.
Okay, so we've talked about the shapes of relationships, but now let's talk about the individual philosophies. This is less about the structure and way more about the mindset.
A sex therapist, Jada Shua-Varnasri, points out, this is where things get really creative and personal. It's about being the architect of your own relationships and building something that genuinely works for you, instead of trying to squeeze into a pre-made box.
Take solo polyamory, for example. This idea completely flips the script on the whole life goal is to find your other half narrative. Here, the individual sees themselves as their own primary partner first and foremost.
And the philosophy of relationship anarchy takes this even further. It basically asks, hey, why does romantic love automatically get the top spot on the podium? From this point of view, a deep platonic friendship could be just as important and central to your life as a romantic partner. Every relationship is defined on its own terms.
So you might have noticed a theme here. A lot of these ideas really challenge the status quo, which brings us to a really important question. Why does this conversation seem so connected to the LGBTQ+ community?
While the connection is really rooted in a shared experience. Think about it. Many queer people have already had to tear up the traditional rulebook on relationships just to be themselves.
So once you've already started questioning one of society's biggest rules, it's a pretty natural next step to start questioning another one, the rule of monogamy.
All right, for our final section, let's get practical. For anyone listening whose curiosity has been sparked, here's some advice from the experts on where you might even begin.
So the journey really starts with you. First, just be curious. Let yourself think about what you want without any judgment. Then, do your homework. Read books, listen to people with experience. A huge one is finding community, because you can't do this in a vacuum. And finally, be ready to practice accountability, to be honest, to communicate, and to own your impact on others.
You know, at the end of the day, this whole exploration leaves us with a really powerful question that applies to everybody, no matter what your relationship style is. Forget the labels for a second. What are the core values, like trust, communication, joy, autonomy, that you want to build your connections on? Because that's the real foundation of any healthy relationship.